Today, a clean sweep for MAGA-style Republicans in New Hampshire. All three of the state's Trump-aligned congressional hopefuls won their primary contests.
In the GOP Senate race, retired Army General and 2020 election denier Don Bolduc narrowly defeated establishment candidate Chuck Morse. Bolduc will go on to face Democratic incumbent Maggie Hassan in a race that could help decide which party controls the Senate. Joining us now is CNN political analyst Kirsten Powers and former Republican Congressman Charlie Dent. Great to see both of you. Congressman, what does it say that election deniers, once again, conspiracy theorists, beat the mainstream candidates that were backed by, Mitch McConnell and the Republican Governor Sununu? How is this happening?
Well, regrettably, this is where the party's going. This is part of a trend. We've seen, Allison, that the Trumpier candidates have been winning. The MAGA candidates have been winning. And in New Hampshire, in this case, there could be a real consequence. The other candidate, Morse, was certainly considered to be much more electable than Bolduc, but the voters made a choice. They've got Bolduc, and if I'm Senator Hassan, I'm probably pretty relieved by that. Now, having said that, Bolduc could still win. He could still win. It's not impossible, but he makes it much harder. And I think in many cases around the country, we've seen this where Republicans have nominated candidates who are perceived as too extreme or election deniers in swing states or in marginal districts around the country, and will make their path to gaining majorities in both the Senate and the House much more challenging.
But in some of these races, Kirsten, do you believe that since history suggests that the party out of power will likely take control and maybe they have some advantages there in the states because of the demographics, that some of these deniers will get into office and lead the legislative agendas of Congress?
Oh, I don't think that's as great a risk than if the more moderate candidates had won. I think if those candidates had won, then yes, what you just said would be the case. I think they would be more likely to end up in office. I think that these are candidates that very much resonate with the base of the Republican Party, but they don't resonate with the broader electorate. They don't resonate with independents, for example. So I think that they're going to be much easier for Democrats to beat, even allowing for the fact that Democrats are the president in the party in power tends to do worse than the party out of power in the first midterm elections. But I think that the Republicans are giving Democrats a hope of beating that trend by nominating people who are so widely out of the mainstream.
Kirsten, I want to stick with you. What is Senator Lindsey Graham doing? Why is he proposing? I mean, well, honestly, I don't understand this. Why is he proposing a federal anti-abortion law that would ban all abortion across the country at 15 weeks? I don't think that he understands how pregnancy works. You don't often get important testing until 20 weeks. What is this that he's doing?
Yeah, well, I don't think he really cares to understand it, and he's clearly established himself as somebody who's pretty extreme on this issue. I mean, he had a previous bill that was at 20 weeks, so this one is worse than that one, but the 20-week span also is pretty bad. I don't know what he's doing, because you usually look at these things and you think, well, they're doing it because it's helpful politically, and perhaps it's helpful to him in some way, but it's not helpful to the Republican Party, and that's been pretty clear in the way Mitch McConnell's responded to it, which is to say, that the Republican position is that they believe this should be handled by the states, which is actually something that Lindsey Graham said not that long ago, and now has turned around and tried to introduce this very radical legislation that will definitely alienate voters.
Yeah. You pointed out this is, again, something that Lindsey Graham himself said. This was 6 weeks ago. So let's play what Lindsey Graham said about what the state should determine and now what he's saying about this new bill.
I've been consistent. I think states should decide the issue of marriage and states should decide the issue of abortion. I have respect for South Carolina. South Carolina voters here, I trust, to define marriage and to deal with the issue of abortion. I think we should have a law at the federal level that would say after 15 weeks, no abortion on demand, except in cases of rape, incest, to save the life of the mother. If we take back the House and the Senate, I can assure you we'll have a vote on our bill.
Lindsey Graham reversing himself on a position is not new, but why this bill this way right now, Congressman?
Well, look, there's a certain incoherence to all of this. The Republican position for years had been, let this be handled by the states, as Lindsey Graham had said previously. And now they want a 15-week ban, which could suggest that maybe Republicans at the federal level would tacitly support abortion up to 15 weeks. The point is, he's introducing this legislation because states post-Roe are passing laws that ban abortion completely with few or no exceptions. And that is politically just outrageous. And so he thinks, I believe, that by introducing this bill, Republicans can land at a better place. I would argue this is better than what the states are doing, but it is still incoherent. As the last pro-choice Republican member of the U.S. House, I can tell you many Republicans are discovering that pre-Dobbs, that they would enact these bills, knowing that they would never become law or take effect because of Roe. But now that the backstop has been pulled, the goalie has been pulled, so to speak, there are real consequences. They're no longer shooting blanks, they're shooting live rounds on abortion, and this is just one more case. I think this is a bit incoherent. Why do you want a federal law when you've been saying for years you want the states to handle it? Hard to have it both ways, and I think this muddles the issue further and may not present any real political advantage to Republicans on this issue. They know they're in a defensive position.
I would also say it's just terrible political calculus, because even in conservative states, you've seen people saying that they don't like these bans, right? So what Lindsey Graham is saying is, we're not just going to do it in conservative states, we're going to do it for the entire country, right? So what do you think is going to what would happen in the states, you know, the non-red states, right? So these just aren't very popular. The leaders of the Republican Party are wildly are not connected with what even their own voters, many of whom even identify as pro-life, want.